today I will be giving you my final 2024 presidential election prediction. After hours of research, I do feel very confident in this prediction. So let's get into it. We're going to start off with Kamala Harris's and Donald Trump's safe states. Let's start with Kamala Harris. Her safe states are Washington, Oregon, California, Hawaii, Colorado, Illinois, Vermont, Connecticut, New Jersey, Delaware, Maryland, DC, Massachusetts, Rhode Island, New York, and Maine's 1st Congressional District, putting her safe electoral votes at 191. Now we're going to go to Donald Trump's safe states. We have Alaska, Utah, Idaho, Wyoming, Montana, North and South Dakota, Nebraska at large, along with Nebraska's 1st and 3rd congressional districts, Kansas, Oklahoma, Missouri, Arkansas, Louisiana, Mississippi, Alabama, Tennessee, South Carolina, Kentucky, Indiana, and West Virginia, putting Donald Trump's safe electoral votes at 125. Again, safe states are states that are going to be decided by 12 or more points. Now we're going to go to the likely states for Kamala Harris and Donald Trump. Let's start with Kamala Harris. Likely states are states that are going to be decided by 6 to 12 points. So Kamala Harris's first likely state is New Mexico. Now, New Mexico voted for Biden by 11 points in 2020, and I do expect it to become closer because of Latinos shifting to the right. And so for that reason, I have this as a likely margin for Kamala Harris. The next state I have as a likely margin is Virginia. Now, Virginia voted for Biden by 10 points in 2020, but then just 1 year after that, it elected a Republican governor, and really a shock of the nation. So I do believe it's going to become closer in this election because of trends in the Virginia area. Donald Trump actually had a rally in Virginia, and so I do believe he will win it probably by 6 or 7 points, but that will still be a likely margin. And then the last state that I have as a likely margin is Maine at large. Maine at large voted for Biden by 9 points in 2020. And because of this environment, I see it trending a little to the right, but it's still going to be a likely margin for Kamala Harris. Now we're going to go to Donald Trump's likely state. The first state that I have as a likely state is Texas. Now, Texas voted for Trump by 5.6% in 2020. And 4 years before that, I voted for Trump by 9 points. So this is definitely a left trending state. But there has been a trend that's basically offsetting the Democrat trend of Texas, and that it has been Latinos turning to the right in the Rio Grande Valley. And so because I do see Latinos trending to the right, I see Texas as a likely margin. Another state that I have as a likely margin is Florida. Now, Florida voted for Trump by 3 points in 2020. And it has been a state that has been trending to the right. It actually re-elected its Republican governor in 2022 by 19 points. And because it's a right trending state, I see this as a likely margin. Another likely margin that we have is Maine at large. Maine at large voted for Trump by 6 points in 2020. And I do see it trending to the right being a likely margin. We also have Ohio. Ohio is also a right trending state. It really used to be a very competitive state. In fact, back in 2008, Obama won this state, but in 2016 and 2020, Trump won it by 8 points respectively in both years. And so I do believe he's going to be able to win it again by a likely margin, and that's the same said with Iowa. Iowa voted for Trump by 8 points both in 2016 and in 2020, and like Ohio, it's been a very rightward trending state, and for that reason, I have it as a likely margin. So that finishes off our Republican likely margins. Now we're going to go to the lean margins for each party. We're going to start off with Kamala Harris. I do believe that she's going to win Minnesota by a lean margin. Now, Tim Walz being her running mate is definitely going to help her in the state of Minnesota, but I still believe it's going to become more competitive from 2020 when Biden won by 7 points, just because of the national environment and because Trump has a strength with rural voters. So I do see this going to Harris by a lean margin. Same goes with New Hampshire. But Vance actually had a rally in New Hampshire, which is not really considered one of the battleground states. This definitely does show that the Trump campaign does see a little bit of hope, maybe in New Hampshire, that they have been campaigning a little bit there. So I do believe this state will trend a little to the right, just like Minnesota, but it's still going to be a lean margin for Kamala Harris. And then the last lean margin characterization I have is Nebraska's 2nd district. This district voted for Biden by 6 points in 2020. It was redistricted to become more Republican, but Kamala Harris has had a strength in this district. She also went campaigning there, and as of right now, I do think she's going to be able to win this by a lean margin. So that's it with our lean margins for both Kamala Harris and Donald Trump. Now, Donald Trump doesn't actually have any lean margins. Now we're going to go to the tilt margins for Kamala Harris and Donald Trump. So all of these 7 swing states I am predicting will be tilt margins either in Kamala Harris's favor or Donald Trump's. So we're going to start off with the state of North Carolina. Now, right now, if we look at the North Carolina early vote, we see that right now Republicans are up 1 point against registered Democrats. If you look back at 2020, they're doing a lot better because Democrats were up by 5 points, and Trump did go on to end up winning this state. So right now, it is looking really good for Donald Trump in North Carolina. Not only that, but if you look at the early vote, Republicans are also doing really well in places that were hit by Hurricane Helene, especially around the Asheville area. And so I do believe because Donald Trump has a strength in these rural counties and that Republicans are really just getting out the vote in North Carolina, I do see Trump winning this by a tilt margin. The next state that we're going to look at is this Peach State, the state of Georgia, and its 16 electoral votes. If we look at the early vote right now, we see that white voters make up 57.8% of the electorate, while black voters make up 26.3% of the electorate. Now, white voters overwhelmingly vote for Trump, probably by about like 20 points, and then black voters vote for Democrats by like 80 points. So black voters are a key demographic for Democrats. Now, if we look at the 2020 data, we see that white voters made up for 56.5% of the electorate, and non-Hispanic blacks made up for 27.7% of the electorate. So what that really means is that white voters are now up 1% and black voters are down 1% in the early vote. And that really should be concerning to Democrats because the main reason why Biden won was he was able to drive up the turnout in the Atlanta metro area. You also look at the news, we see that rural Georgia counties are outpacing Democrat strongholds in Georgia. So that's not looking too good for Democrats right now, and for that reason, I have Georgia as a tilt Republican state. The next state that we're going to look at is the state of Arizona. Now, if we look at the early voting out of Arizona, we see that Republicans are up 9 points in the early voting. Now, one issue that Republicans have, or they like to call these voters McCain voters, they basically are more moderate Republicans who tend to vote for Democrats nowadays, and so that's a big problem that Republicans have. But if you look back at 2020, we see that Republicans are only up 3 points. That means that they are tripling their margins in the early voting. That is not a good sign for Democrats right now. Also, Latino voters are really not looking good for Democrats right now. Trump is gaining with Latino voters in Arizona, and I do believe he's going to be able to end up winning this by a tilt margin. The next state that we're going to look at is the state of Nevada. If we look at the early voting, we see that Republicans are up by 4 points in the early voting. Now, if we look back at 2020, we see that Democrats were up 4 points. So this is totally the opposite of what it was in 2020. Joe Biden only ended up winning Nevada by 30,000 votes or 55,000 votes. So Nevada, I do believe, is going to be able to go to Trump because of Latino shifts and because of strong early voting numbers for the Republicans in Nevada. So now we're going to go to the all-important Rust Belt states. I really truly believe that these Rust Belt states are going to determine the election. We're going to start off with the state of Wisconsin. So right now we see that Democrats are up 8 points in the early vote in Wisconsin. If we look back at 2020, we see that Republicans were actually up 8 points. So this is not a good sign for Republicans at all. Now, another thing to keep in mind, right now 40% of early voting is estimated to be done by independents. You look back at 2020, that was only 22%. So we don't really know what way independents are shifting, so that's definitely one thing to keep in the back of your mind. Also, this only makes up for about like a little over 50% of the estimated vote. That's also a thing that you should keep in mind. But if you look at Wisconsin polling, which I don't really like to look at polling because polling is almost always off in every election, Harris is up, and in most of the states Harris has been down. You look at Pennsylvania, North Carolina, Georgia, Arizona, and Nevada, she is down. But if you look at Wisconsin, that's actually one of the states that Harris is leading in the average. So I definitely do believe that she has an advantage right now. Another big reason that I believe she has the advantage is because of white women abandoning Republicans, especially white suburban women. And that will really play a big part in Wisconsin, considering that Wisconsin has a big suburban population. And so for right now, I do believe Kamala Harris is going to win this by a tilt margin. The next state that we're going to look at is the state of Michigan. If we look at the early voting out of Michigan, we see that Republicans are down 3 points. If we look back at 2020, we see that Republicans were up 2 points. So that is definitely not going to be a good sign for Republicans. Also, what's not a good sign is that right now, white suburban women are really trending to Kamala Harris. She's getting a boost among Hispanic and suburban women. Now, that's good for Kamala Harris, but we also see that Trump is gaining among Arab Americans and among manufacturing workers in Michigan. So I definitely do think that those are really going to balance themselves out. But as of right now, if I had to pick who I think is favored in Michigan, I would say Kamala Harris by a tilt margin. Alright, so now we have the Keystone State, the state that I believe will really determine the election, the all-important state of Pennsylvania. If we look at the early vote right now, we see that Republicans are down 24 points, and back in 2020, they were up by 38 points. Now, I do want to say something that is really important, so listen to this right now. Back in 2020, Democrats' firewall was 1.1 million. So you might be wondering, what is a firewall? So firewall was basically how many votes they had ahead of Republicans coming into election day. Basically, what advantage of early voting they had over Republicans. 1.1 million. That is down to only 400,000. Guys, I said 400,000. That means it's a 700,000 decrease in their firewall, the firewall that Republicans had such a hard time trying to overcome in election day voting. That's going to have a big impact. And that's not only the good news for Trump, there's also more. We see that Trump is gaining with Latinos in Pennsylvania. Latinos make up for 580,000 voters in Pennsylvania, a big portion of the electorate. And on top of that, he's also growing with union workers, which is also going to be tough for the Democrats. So for all of those reasons, for right now, I do believe that the Keystone State will split with Michigan and Wisconsin and vote for Trump, putting Trump over the 270 threshold to win the election. So this is my final 2024 presidential election prediction. Donald Trump would win 287 electoral votes to Kamala Harris's 250. 51. I hope you guys enjoyed this video. If you did, make sure to smash the like button down below and subscribe. Thank you guys so much for 700 subscribers. Your support means so much to me. Shout out to Diana Barbie, our first channel member. If you'd like to become a member, you can hit the join button near my channel logo. And as always, thank you guys so much for watching, and I'll see you guys in the next one.